Hello everyone, and welcome to the Grizzled Warmaster. My name is Doug, and today we're going to be looking at the big man of the Lumineth himself, Teclis, the Archmage, and I guess Celennar. Today we're going to look at Teclis' War Scroll, some tactics, and the value I think he brings to the battlefield. I will start off right away saying I believe most competitive Lumineth Realm Lords lists will include Archmage Teclis. He just brings so much to the army. Despite his hefty price tag and how squishy he can be, he is a super powerful individual and can make for a really competitive army, in my opinion. So let's go ahead and take a look at his base stats and all of the special abilities he has on his War Scroll. First of all, he is a monster and a leader because of Celennar, his mount, or who is treated as a mount. He starts with a movement of 12 inches that degrades down to 4 inches because he has 16 wounds. He is a degrading model. He has a save of 4+, which I think is a little weak for a 660 point model, but at least he can use Ether Quartz to bump that up to a 3+ in, as long as that's available. And he starts with a bravery characteristic of 10. Obviously, if he's not got a Cathalar available to mitigate the Ether Quartz use, he will degrade on that front, but that's where it starts. He has a missile weapon, the Lunar Staff, gets 1 shot. It's 2s to hit, 2s to wound, -3 Ren, D6 damage. And I forgot to put in here, it's an 18-inch range, so pretty good. And actually, let me just double check that. I'm 90% sure it is an 18-inch range on that. Yes. Then in melee, he has the Sword of Teclis, which is a 1-inch range, as are the Moonbright Talons. Again, I forgot to put those on here. He gets 2 attacks with the Sword of Teclis, 4s to hit, 2s to wound, -3 Ren, D3 damage. That's pretty good, but not what you take him for. Again, Moonbright Talons start at 6, degrade down to 2. 3s and 3s, -2, 2 damage. Not bad. Pretty typical for the mount of like a Mortarch or somebody like that. So it's typical and enough for him to be a bit of a melee threat, but it's not his main role. He can also fly, obviously. He's up there floating, and he's got his he mounts wings, so that makes sense. And I'm going to go out of order on his War Scroll. If you're looking in the book, you're going to wait, this isn't how it's, because I want to knock out a couple of the non-magic related abilities, or not directly related to him. These are more his support role abilities that bump up people around him. He's got the Aura of Celennar. It's a 16-inch range that, as he gets wounded, degrades down to 4. Gives +1 to casting, dispelling, and unbinding of friendly Lumineth units in range of the aura. And he will always be in range. Now, we will see, because of his Archmage ability, the +1 to casting does not help him, but the +1 to dispelling and unbinding will. He does benefit from those, so that's something to keep in mind. He also has the Seeing Stone of Celennar, which is probably one of his most powerful abilities. Friendly units within range of the Aura of Celennar above ignore spells and endless spells on a 4+. And if you successfully resist the spell, you pick an enemy unit within 18 inches of the target that resisted, and that enemy suffers D3 mortal wounds. So that is pretty cool. Next, we'll look at his Archmage ability, and he has a pretty unique way of casting spells. He can cast, and he has to choose at the start of the hero phase, so you can't wait until you've thrown out other spell casting from your other wizards to see where you're going to be at. You have to pick at the beginning. He can cast 1 spell, 2 spells, or 4 spells. If he casts 1, it is cast as if it were casting value 12, but it is automatically cast and cannot be unbound. If he casts 2 spells, they also are cast as if he had rolled a 12. And in all of these cases, the rolls can't be modified. They are what they are. He casts as if they rolled 12, But enemy wizards can unbind these. So if you've got people who've got bonuses to dispel or unbind, they can attempt to stop him. And then finally, he can choose to cast 4 spells. It is cast as if a casting value of 10 was rolled, and enemies can attempt to unbind these. Then he's got the Discs of Elementary. In your hero phase, in addition to casting 1, 2, or 4 spells, Teclis may automatically dispel 1 endless spell. And in the enemy hero phase, he can automatically unbind 1 enemy spell, assuming it's within range. Teclis can unbind any number of spells in the enemy hero phase, so he is an infinite unbind, and with the +1, he will always be getting +1 to unbind against every enemy who's in range if you need him to. And then with your other wizards, you have a broad range of where that 30-inch range of dispelling is. He knows Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield, Protection of Teclis, Storm of Searing White Light, and all spells from the lore of Hysh and the lore of the High Peaks. He is an extremely versatile wizard, especially considering how powerful these 2 spell lores are. The lore of Hysh and the lore of the High Peaks can be very devastating. There are almost too many spells to choose from that you're going to want to cast pretty much every turn. Luckily, you've got an awful lot of casters in this army. But let's look at his 2 unique spells. The first is Protection of Teclis. It has a casting value of 10. If successfully cast, until your next hero phase, anytime a friendly unit wholly within 18 inches takes a mortal wound, or a mortal wound, on a 5+, that wound or mortal wound is negated. You cannot cast Protection of Teclis in the same hero phase as Protection of Hysh. But remember, if one fails, it doesn't count as being cast. That's the other one's opened up then. So if you attempt to cast Protection of Teclis and it is unbound, it has not been cast then, so somebody can try and cast Protection of Hysh. Let's see. Then he has Storm of Searing White Light, also casting value of 10. If successfully cast, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster and visible to them. On a 1, nothing happens. On a 2 to 4, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. On a 5+, that unit suffers D6 mortal wounds. This can be extraordinarily a potent ability, especially combined with some of the other spells he can cast. And especially and we'll look at this later when we're talking tactics, if he uses the spell portal to push that 18-inch range out quite a bit further. All right, here are some of the strengths and weaknesses of Teclis. First, his strength. He only has 1, and that is absolute magical dominance. There are few armies that will be able to contest with Teclis on a magical front. Even somebody like Nagash is going to struggle, especially with his ability to just say one spell a turn is cast automatically. If you have like Nagash, or you've got a wizard-heavy Disciples of Tzeentch, or you've got Croak out there, you can hold back and just cast your Bubble of Protection of Teclis automatically, can't be unbound, and then rely on your other units to soften up or reduce the enemy's magical abilities before then coming back with Teclis's wider range of abilities. So, for example, if you're fighting the Tzeentch, and they've got 6 casters on the board, four character casters and a couple of unit casters, you can say, well, I'm going to pepper the guys who, I think it's now I'm forgetting, I'm spacing on their name, but the scribes, I think it is, who gives everybody the ability to reroll. You can go, well, I'm just going to cast Protection of Teclis, can't be unbound, and then I'm going to use my archers to whittle down the number of heroes they have that can interfere. Or I'm going to use my units my archers again, probably, to whittle Nagash down to where he's not got a +3 to his unbind attempts. It's more like +2 or +1. So now I can try and sneak a couple more spells in through Teclis. So very powerful. His weaknesses, they are substantial. One is he has a hefty point cost. 660 points is nothing to sneeze about. He is pretty squishy for that point cost. He has 16 wounds, but only a 4-up save and no after save, no damage prevention save until he gets Protection of Teclis up. So it is important for Teclis to go first. And I forgot to put this in, I was rearranging all my stuff. I was talking about mitigating weaknesses. You need first turn to cast Protection of Teclis or Protection of Hysh, and that comes through War Scroll battalions. There are a couple of War Scroll battalions that are really good that can get you down to a 2-drop army pretty easily. So that can give you the first turn to get that Protection of Teclis up and give him a little more durability. Because I saw a battle report where Kharadron Overlords were able to kill him on the first turn. He never even got to go. So that is bad. If you can take out 660 points before it even gets to do anything. So I would always design my Lumineth Realm Lords armies that have Teclis in them to be as few drops as possible. Another way you can mitigate the weaknesses he has is taking him in Sciar, which gives him 2 Ether Quartz, so he can increase his armor save a couple of times, get him that 3-up armor save. Some other things to consider is, do you want to have the Umbral Spell Portal in your army? It isn't cheap. I believe it's 70 points. But if you have that in your army, it allows Teclis to begin using his impressive spell power offensively right away. Especially if you put him back greater than 30 inches, so nobody except for Celennar would be able to unbind his spells. You throw that out 18 inches, you got another 18 inches, so you're at least hitting the first ranks of the enemy's army right away. So that could be really potent in certain situations. And it's also going to allow you, generally the spell portal is best in the first turn, maybe first 2 turns of the game, but loses importance later on. However, if you have an enemy who leaves squishy units in the back, you can always use the spell portal to jump over the front of his army to start hitting those units in the back. So it could be really good. The reason you would vote no on taking the Umbral Spell Portal is kind of costly. It's 70 points for a spell that really is only going to be useful for the first turn, maybe 2 turns, after which his ability to move around the board, your army's pushing out and archers taking out stuff in the back ranks probably just as well as he could. The ability to project that power much further kind of diminishes as the game goes on. All right, so let's look at some tactics. I've kind of peppered these in as we've been talking. Choosing when to how much to cast depends on your opponent. If you are up against one of those magically powerful armies that I pointed out, you're going to want to start with 1 or 2 spells until you've been able to counter, their counter magic has been thinned out. You've taken out a couple of their heroes that can unbind spells, and they've only got abilities to unbind just a couple, maybe with few or no bonuses anymore. Then you can draw out unbinds by throwing out your spells that, empower... No, it's not Empower Now, right? Weapons, that's the wrong one. Power of Hysh, where you increase your mortal wounds output. Some people might be inclined to try and stop those, leaving Nagash open to cast more spells. But against armies that don't have those pluses to unbind or have few characters able to unbind, you can almost always cast 4 spells. So, let loose. Army positioning. Against magically powerful armies, you're going to want to keep all of your army within his Seeing Stone of Celennar range until you've been able again to thin out their ability to project that magical power. So you've got that just one more barrier against being targeted by spells. You may want to keep your army back out of that 30-inch range to get some of your initial buffs off right away. And then against other armies, you can just push forward, keep your army generally within the 18 inches of Protection of Teclis, but otherwise you can kind of push up the board. That with his base size and an 18-inch bubble, you can control most of the board. And you can control it, unless you're running one of those 4 objectives per side. It's going to be pretty easy to keep your army within the bubble and still be able to control the objectives you need to control. We already kind of talked about the Umbral Spell Portal. One thing to note is the spells that would benefit from it are the short-range spells like the Storm of Searing White Light, Entomb, and Crippling Vertigo. And you can get those into combat right away. And even other wizards in your army, especially like the Cathalar with their Darkness of the Soul ability, which is Crippling Vertigo but better, they can really kind of hamper the enemy's first couple of turns movement and their ability to just act right away. Entomb is great. We see here, looking at some of the spell selections, Entomb is really great against armies that rely on specialists to accomplish some goal. For example, the OC Bone Reapers have the Hecatos. You hit their blocks of Mortek Guard, you entomb that Hecatos, they can't function away from their heroes and still make their Deathless Warrior save or activate any of their Relentless Discipline abilities. So that can be very powerful. It can even be really good against Lumineth Realm Lords, where you can knock out the High Wardens or the High Sentinels in their Venari units and stop them from being wizards. So it can be very devastating. Voice of the Mountain is always going to be a good one, and I bring this one up because generally the way I'm looking at running, I'm going to run a mostly Venari list with a Teclis and a Cathalar, and that's pretty much it. That's all you can really afford. We'll see when the new units come out if we want to mix some of those in, but you can get a 2-drop army with the Aralon Legion, where you just take a couple of units of Sentinels, a couple of units of Wardens, a Cathalar, Teclis, and now you drop 2 drops, but you only have Teclis to get those the Lore of the High Peaks. And Voice of the Mountain is probably one of the most potent of those Lore of the High Peaks spells. And it can be devastating, especially combined with his ability to cast Storm of Searing White Light and the ability of your archers to pepper the enemy from distance. So your Voice of the Mountain makes, on that turn that you cast it, their entire army is at -2 leadership. And if you hit them, hit most of their army with Searing White Light, now they all have to take leadership checks at least -2, well, -3, because they've lost at least one guy. So that can really start to hurt, so especially those low leadership armies that are just devastated by it. But even solid ones like the Stormcast or some of those mid-tier that have 6 to 8, now they're quite a bit weaker. And there's a good chance that even if they've only taken 1 wound, they're going to lose another 1 or 2 to people running away. So that Voice of the Mountain is very potent. So that's my kind of rundown of Teclis, his abilities, some tactics, how I would use him, and how I would kind of mitigate his weakness as well. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Is Teclis going to be in your army? Do you think there are some strengths or weaknesses I missed? Or is there something in the army that you're seeing that you would take instead of Teclis? Let me know in the comments down below. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell notification to be alerted when we put out videos. I'm going to try and get 2 out a week at least. If you would, the way you could really help us right now is share this video with your friends. Help us grow our subscriber base. I appreciate you guys, and I will talk to you soon.